Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Recollection Step, a Grand Archive TCG podcast, part of the Maindeck podcast family. I'm Dan.
And I'm Taylor. Dan, it's been a while again.
Yeah.
What's going on here? What happened here? Why did we take another break?
We quit podcasting. We're done.
This is actually our farewell episode. We want to thank all of our listeners for being so dedicated.
Don't take it that far. They're gonna shut it off. No. I went to Europe. I saw a lot of you guys there. It was so much fun. It was incredibly cool to get to meet like a side of the community that I hadn't gotten to meet basically at all. Like we had there's a few Europeans who would make the trip to a few ascents here and there. But I'd been to Singapore and I got to see a lot of the Southeast Asian community there, and a lot of them, especially like the higher, the more performing players, have traveled to things like Worlds and the closer ascents to them, like in Santa Clara. But it was like a totally different side of Grand Archive, and everyone was so cool. It was amazing. It was so much fun. So that took a couple of weeks. And just, I think the timing before that was off too. And we had to leave like early and then arrive late. And it was, so we just kind of missed some stuff. And, obviously in our absence, the meta has, really, I would say, taken the shape of the container that it's been put in, right? Which is to say, it's very watery these days.
I thought you were about to reference the classic Guillermo del Toro film, The Shape of Water.
I was thinking about that actually, but
because that's definitely where it is.
Yes. After Santa Clara, things have gotten wet and wild in Grand Archive, with a lot of watermill happening, and everybody knows it. It's no secret to anybody out there. So in today's episode, I think the main topic we're going to talk about when we kind of get to that stage is following up this very water-packed and also, let's mention, cleric-packed metagame with Arasana, Mill, Astra kind of being a big force.
Yep.
And then recently we saw making some splashes, the Vanitas builds of Watermill. After all of this, we have revealed some of the upcoming cards from Abyssal Heaven. Super exciting new set, including the Recollection deck, which is a Water Cleric Recollection deck.
Excellent timing. It's exactly what we needed to save us from this water domination.
Yeah. It's and a lot of these cards, I mean, we're all looking at them, we're chatting in like the Maindeck competitive team Discord. We're like, yeah, like a lot of these can slot right in.
These are really good cards.
So as excited as, well, not Taylor, but as excited as I am for Guoja, we're going to put off all the exciting Guoja discussion for probably the next episode of Recollection Step, when I think we'll hopefully have all 4 of the auspicious beasts to talk about, maybe a little more idea about her kit, because her kit is very, very interesting, right? Built around sort of a new mechanic, these fate stones that flip into beasts, and I think it'll make a lot more sense to talk about that later. But in this episode, our big topic is just what we need. Another Water Cleric deck. The impact and everything that we were kind of expecting at this early stage.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so they had the dev stream where they go over the design notes and themes of the set this last Saturday before recording here, where they showed off all these sweet cards that are coming out in the Recollection decks and a few that are coming out in Abyssal Heaven itself. So if you want to look at these as we're talking along, You can see them at like sylvie.gg. There's a spoiler section on that website, or proxyiscodex.com as well as another site where we have some excellent community members uploading these for us to reference as spoiler season goes on.
Yeah, I'll throw a couple links in the description. I will, if you're watching the video, I will be popping up some images as well. Depending on how ambitious Taylor is, I won't necessarily have every card image displayed on screen, but I'm going to do my best to put kind of the most important ones on.
I am planning on being very ambitious. We're just going to go over all these cards actually in alphabetical order, so get ready. No, I'm just kidding. We will not make you guys suffer through that. Although, yeah, I'm very excited to talk about Diao Chan, actually. Of the two Recollection decks, this is definitely the one I am anticipating the most and the most excited for. We finally figure out what their counters do. We finally figure out what Flowerbud tokens are after already having seen her level 3 from the CSR preview that was out a couple weeks ago. And now we're seeing kind of the rest of her kit as well. So let's just... As excited as I am to talk about Tera and Tera Cleric, let's start with Water, because that's where everybody's at right now anyway. So should we just dive right into this, Dan, and get going?
Well, it is the Water, right?
It is the Water. We're going to dive in. So Diao Chan is just like this really sweet champion in the first place. Her level 1 is going to come in on enter. You put 2 Glimmer counters on Diao Chan, and then she has an inherited effect, which means that she has it as she levels up. But the effect is that you can rest her to activate a reaction spell card from your memory, pay its reserve cost only by removing that many Glimmer counters from Diao Chan, and activate this ability only during an opponent's turn. So using the 2 Glimmer counters she got on enter, you can use this to activate any sort of spell reactions you have in your memory, such as like Frostbind. That is a spell reaction. If you're playing her in Wind, I know that's not the topic, but Veiling Breeze, another spell reaction. There's lots of spell reactions.
And Diablerie.
There's been a lot of talk about Diablo. People are excited to hit somebody with that out of memory from a Diao Chan. And honestly, if you're playing against a Diao Chan that started on a Spirit of Wind, you probably just leave your Grand Crusader's rings in your material deck, because it's not going to end well.
You brought 11 cards to the material deck today. You don't want to. I mean, that's the thing about Diao Chan. By the way, I put the CSR on the is because
great choice.
I just shout
beautiful Panakes art.
Panakes. This is too much, man. I don't know how I can possibly I'm a huge Guoja fan, so I'm going to be trying to hunt those down. But Taylor's like, you can just trade me your Diao Chans, and I'm like, I don't know that I can. I'm not sure I'm able to if I pull one. But yeah, the thing that's so powerful about this level 1, honestly, I think this is one of the better level 1s in the game, I would say.
This is incredible.
Because this ability allows you to free play that card. It's only removing the Glimmer counters instead of reserving, right? Mm-hmm. So it's that. It's as if on the turn that you use this, you had an extra 3 cards in hand, right? So it's you can think of it as an agility 3, but you have full control over using that, and it's inherited, meaning that when we get to the level 2, this starts to compound and become more powerful.
Yeah. Spoiler alert: there are more ways to put Glimmer counters on Diao Chan.
Yes.
Yeah, and like you said, we've all seen how good Stifling Trap was out of Tristan when people played her. Getting to play that for free from your memory, and this is the same thing, but you can do that with any card at all. You can do that with Frostbind, you can do that with Frozen Dismissal, the new Cleric counter negation spell. You can do that with basically all of her new Diao Chan's new stuff that we'll be talking about is all reactions.
The whole deck is built obviously to work with it, right?
So you just have a ton of options here, and you have so much more flexibility than just make sure an on-enter doesn't happen or stop somebody's dungeon guide. So just the flexibility it has to let you play with everything and then still hold up interaction on your opponent's turn is insane. And then of course, on top of all of that, this plays really well into the cleric mechanic of adding memory gates on abilities, kind of like class bonus or Diao Chan bonus. Instead of like that, you'll have a memory 4+ or a memory 3+, where if you have that many cards in memory, the effect activates.
Yeah, the big problem we've had with cards that have the memory mechanic on them, like Taylor, you and I in our competitive testing, we were running into this because there was a little bit before Santa Clara in our Water Ari build where we were playing, oh my God, I can't think of the name. Stream of Consciousness.
Oh yes. Yep.
Stream of Consciousness for about a day.
Yes.
Stream of Consciousness was in the list. And it went through a kind of a rigorous testing day. And it was that memory 4, I think it is on it. Memory 3 or 4. One of the two.
I think it's 3+ because the card costs 2.
It's one more than the cost, so it should be memory 3. Now that I think about it, yeah. But that memory 3 was a frustrating requirement because the deck just never wanted to put that many cards down. Because if you guys have been playing the meta, you're familiar with. You are really, really trying to stay as reactive as you can in the current Water Mill decks. We talk a lot about you only Icebound early on because once it gets to a couple turns into the game, if you put too many cards down, the opponent runs you over, right? And it's so powerful for Diao Chan. Like, I'm looking at Stream of Consciousness now. Again, remember, this is Cleric, right? Cleric class, so she's a Cleric. It's like you can actually just throw things down a little more liberally because you still have access to that play on your opponent's turn. Yep. And you can actually choose to either go, okay, I'm going to play like one whole more thing than usual. I can react to you like 3 or 4 times on your turn, or I can progress. I can play my Fantasia. I can play my stuff out and then still go ahead and use those cards out of memory. I think it's one of these things that is not to everyone going to immediately seem powerful.
Yes.
But it's actually, I think, really crazy.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think this is actually what is going to cause her to be playable out of the gate if people like show up to Seattle with her. Her Tera cards are very powerful as well, and Wither counters are cool. 2, they have a strong effect that we'll get to later, but like just the amount of interaction that Diao Chan enables is really going to be what pushes her into the competitive spotlight for sure.
Definitely. Let's talk about the level 2 here, because the level 2, I think, brings everything. It kind of makes the whole kit make sense, right?
Yeah, it sure does. It really ties everything together. So level 2, just Diao Chan lineage like you would expect, and then another inherited effect. So once you get to level 3, you can still keep this again, along with the level 1 effect. At the beginning of your end phase, if the amount of glimmer counters on Diao Chan is less than the amount of Fantasias you control, put an amount of glimmer counters on Diao Chan equal to the difference. So you're in water, you played a Fractal of Rain earlier, you played a Fractal of Polar Depths because that's Cleric class bonus and Diao Chan's a Cleric. You've got 2 Fantasias out now. Maybe you actually let's say you started on Fragmented Spirit of Water too, so now you have 3 Fantasias out. And you before you went to level 2, you used her effect to play a spell from memory on your opponent's turn, so you have 0 glimmer counters now. At the end phase, you're going to see those 3 Fantasias, see that you have 0 glimmer counters. You're going to get 3 - 3 glimmer counters onto Diao Chan. So now every turn, not only are you leaving her up to activate this effect, you're potentially getting more counters to pay for the cards you're playing from memory. This is great too, because now as the number of Fantasias grow that you control, the higher cost cards you can play. So things like, I think Tether in Flames might be like that's another Cleric reaction spell, 4. By the way. Yep. I think that costs 4 with a class bonus reduction of 3 or down to 3.
Yep.
So you can play that, like if you're getting more counters this way. Few other reactions, something like a Spell Shield Wind is a Cleric spell. That costs 2, I guess, with class bonus.
Tether's, I think, actually, you misremember Tether. It's actually class bonuses. I think it reduces it down to 1, if I remember. Wow. It's like, It gets really cheap for Cleric. But the problem was Cleric was never playable when it was starting to get used a little bit. It was Merlin that was playing it.
Yes.
But yeah, either way, it's this is such a cool ability. The way they specifically timed everything to work in here, because you get the counters at the beginning of the end phase, which means you can use them on your opponent, like on level 1, interact with your opponent, level to 2. Maybe the reaction you played was something that actually, do we have reactions with floating memory? There's got to be like a couple, right?
We sure do. Yeah. Thanks to the Diao Chan Recollection deck.
Oh yeah. Right. There's some we're going to go over. That's right. So yeah, you can actually react to your opponent with floating memory, out of memory, use that to level to 2, drop another Fantasia. Maybe that brings you up to, even if that just brings you back up to 2, at that end of the turn, then it'll fill back up to however many Fantasia you have. And then turns on all your interaction again. The thing that I struggle with sometimes when I'm playing Watermill, and I played at Utrecht, I played Vanitas, and I played plenty of Arasana before this. But the thing that I sometimes struggle with is wanting to devote my resources in any turn cycle to putting the Fantasias down. Obviously you got to get that polar depths down at some point, but sometimes you had to kind of predict, like actually, can I afford to drop it right now? Because what's my opponent going to push back with on the next turn? I guarantee I made a couple of slip ups throughout the tournaments in Europe where I think I chose not to play it because I was trying to play around interaction, but I was like too cautious, right? And holding it back a little bit. And I should have just put it down. And I think it bit me on the next turn. It was like, I really needed that down right now to go off. But it's so powerful now if you go the Diao Chan route, because you can just slap them down. You put them down, like not entirely. Don't go crazy, right? Don't be like, well, I'm only gonna have one thing to interact with, but it means that you can put the polar depths down. You still have the reserval from the polar depths, and then you build those glimmer counters back up. So you are really hardly losing anything. In fact, I would say you're not losing any momentum at all.
No, absolutely not.
Because it's for every glimmer counter, it's kind of like that much agility that you have to activate something. So it's almost like free to drop the polar depths down and then just keep going with your interaction.
Yep. Yeah, it's insane. Just like the amount that Diao Chan lets you like progress your board state while still holding up ways to stop what your opponent is doing is just kind of dumb.
Yeah.
Actually,
it's really good.
I haven't seen this in action yet, but like I can only imagine that this is just incredible to play with and horrible to play against. So I'm very excited to get my hands on this and pilot it. And then rounding out the kit here, we've got her level 3, which is a Tera Cleric. Kind of swerves a little bit here. But this is on enter, choose any amount of non-champion objects and put a wither counter on each of them. And then whenever a non-token object an opponent controls is destroyed, you may banish it. If you do, that opponent summons a flower bud token. So we finally get to wither counters. Wither counters are a counter that goes onto a non-champion object, usually. Somehow, potentially, they could go on a champion, I guess, if there's an effect. We haven't seen that yet. But that would be pretty wild, by the way. That would be insane because the effect of wither counters, which are a new functional counter like enlightenment counters or like buff counters, is at the beginning of a player's main phase. If they control one or more objects with wither counters, on them, for each of those objects, they may sacrifice it unless they pay 1 reserve for each wither counter on it, then remove those counters. So Diao Chan's going to go, let's say your opponent has just the 3 allies on board and their champion. Diao Chan's going to go to level 3. She's going to put a wither counter on each of those 3 non-champion objects, those 3 allies, if you wish. And then when your opponent goes to their turn on their main phase, they're going to need to pay 1 reserve for each of those objects, for each of those wither counters. Otherwise, they have to sacrifice them. So it just like taxes your opponent for a turn, essentially. And then flower bud tokens are they're a 1-cost Tera token Fantasia Cleric flower bud, and they have no rules text. So they just there's Fantasias that chill out on your opponent's board. They work with some of her Tera cards, which I think we're going to get to towards the end of our segment here, because I want to circle back to the water cards, but again, this is just kind of showing more like Fantasias that she's putting down and getting into play. They won't give her glimmer counters because they go on your opponent's side, but this is just kind of where her late game power starts to come into play.
Yeah, all you need to know for now is the basic idea is when stuff dies, she makes the flower buds, and then she'll have some cards that turn those. She basically grows those into plants of her choice.
Yep.
that will choke the opponent out or allow you to win the game in a certain way after that. But the key is that this is like this level of Diao Chan, well, all of the levels of Diao Chan are hammering home that she is a control hero, a control champion through and through. She's the one who if you're like, I want to play a control deck, she's telling you, I will let you play things on your opponent's turn for free, and then I will tax your opponent out, and then I will find a way to slowly win the game later on. It's control, control, control.
Yep. Yeah. So it's looks dope. After that, Dan, where do you want to start here with these new water cards that popped up? Because like there's some really nice ones.
There's some. So I mean, I think right before we just kind of get into the specific like individual cards, I just want to talk about Diao Chan in general, just in the context of everything else that we currently have in water, to then look at kind of how what she's bringing to the table interacts with all of that, right? So
yes,
we have a metagame right now where there's a lot of watermill being played, a lot of watermill, and there's sort of a different reason to play each individual champion, right? And I think some of the champions go in and out as far as whether or not you would pick them based on the context of whatever else you expect to play against here. So right away in Santa Clara, we played Water Arasana, and that was because we expected there to be more slimes, more allies being played. It was still kind of the Wild West metagame following Toronto's Vanitas nonsense. So it was the sort of the safe pick into, yep, I'm going to just be able to answer anything that's going to just be a thing on the board with stats. And that worked obviously really effectively. One of the other watermill decks that we've seen consistently since then is the Sylvie into Nico variant. Arguably the most sort of like robust one. The one where your skill can really pull out the wins the most. Ones that, like, for example, Korax literally just won Utrecht with just a solid deck all around with a good finish, good early game plays. There's the variant of that where you play Sylvie and you don't ever go to Nico. In my opinion, less robust, more of a just sort of a high roll version of it, because you play Polar Depths instead. So those two are they're two sides of kind of the same coin. You can choose the one that's a little more like high rolly, or the one that's just a little more just solid throughout the game, but both high skill variants. And those are the ones you play to, I think, be sort of the more of the problem in the metagame. Like Arasana needs to combo to win, whereas the Nico one can kind of put some allies down as Sylvie and then just hit him with the finale and close it. So a little more proactive. And then finally the Vanitas, which is the new variant, which is built almost entirely just to try and beat other watermill decks. You play Vanitas, so you have access to win, so you have access to Scatter Essence. So they put down the fractals and you take them out. Right. And then has some more pressure and some stuff that Vanitas gets to do. So in the context of all these things, we kind of have the traditional like sort of ally board control. And then we have the one that's trying to be more proactive for the two variants of it. And then we have the one that's just trying to eat the other two as much as it can. So Diao Chan falls in an interesting place here, because Arasana already is trying to be controlling, but is more controlling against early game aggression, right?
Yeah, specifically, like she's really controlling against like things your opponent's playing to the board, things specifically with like life stats, like allies. A lot of that's due to Polaris, right? That comes in and just wipes the board and takes care of all your problems. Can get you a huge like 2, 3, 4 for 1, which feels great to play. And just really makes it incredibly difficult for especially ally decks to come back from after they've spent all their beginning turns playing allies and trying to pressure you and using their Grand Crusaders rings and their water baubles and their backup chargers to draw cards and refuel. You would just undo all of that work with a single Polaris, and it's really hard for them to come back into the game. So like that's really where our Asana shines.
Yeah. And Diao Chan doesn't have any of that, right? Diao Chan is actually looks to have the same problems that our team noted with the Vanitas version, which is if you're going to go against allies or slimes now, it's actually a harder matchup. And you choose Vanitas if you're pretty confident you're just not going to go against those at a major tournament. Because it's not a guarantee. Whereas the Arasana deck feels like wind allies should be about a 90-10. I mean, it's so not a 95-5. It's really hard for wind allies to win. Taylor, you had to show everyone that on stream as well.
Yeah, I mean, Polaris just knocks them out so hard.
It's so tough to play into. And Slimes is it's so much easier when you can take the edge off the pressure with Polaris, right?
Yeah.
But Vanitas don't like playing those. He is from experience. Well, I would say actually, I was playing Sylvie in the regional. The Sylvie at the regional, and I was able to just kind of high roll some slimes and take them out.
Yeah, you still get to like play Icebound Slams, and like you still like you hit them for 8, and then maybe you hit them for 8 again, and like if they didn't level up, awesome. If they did, like that's only another 3 damage you have to do, so you can find that 3 damage anywhere.
Right. So the interesting about Diao Chan in that perspective is just like, again, if you expect to play allies, I don't know that she's going to be the choice necessarily. I think you're always going to say, well, Polaris is really good in this situation. But now it's like, well, then what does she bring to the table that Vanitas can't is really the question, because I don't think she looks as proactive as the Sylvie Nico versions are going to be.
No, definitely not.
She doesn't have a turtle, right?
She doesn't have a turtle. She doesn't have a Ravishing Finale. She doesn't have like a huge Mage Bane Lash. Like the Sylvie Nico decks and the Sylvie deck as well are just putting down more threats in general. Like it's a more threat dense deck. And while they do have like reactive capabilities, they're using those reactive capabilities to buy time in order for their threats to do work. Whereas like Arasana, her reactive capabilities are being used to just straight up control the board. Like she's not buying time, she's buying the game. Like she wants to just own everything. She's the Monopoly player that comes in and buys Boardwalk and Park Place right away and just, uses that to buy up all the rest of the properties.
She's the Monopoly player that actually buys all of the hotels because the rule is actually that once you run out of those, you can't build anymore.
Exactly. Yes. Excellent metaphor.
Yeah. So that said, and I want to be clear too, we're talking a lot about Watermill just because it's the meta. Yep. Certainly, potentially Diao Chan decks that are not focused on Watermill, right? But
yeah, the reason we're talking about water, obviously, is because her Recollection deck is water, and those are the most cards we've seen so far.
And right now, we know, we're looking at it's going to be Seattle, the first event after these are legal, and everybody is going to look at these decks, and it's not going to be our unique thought here that. Yep. Well, the Watermill Cleric deck sure could be interesting with the new Cleric. So we're just going to explore that idea here. And I think though that Diao Chan has 2 very clear routes that you can take. And the one is going to be the sort of like, I'm going to slap her in place of Arasana. Yep. So instead of the 1 and 2 or the 1 in Polaris or the 1 in Polaris, the 1-2 in Polaris or the 1 in Polaris, an ingredient pouch, or just the 1 in Polaris, because we've seen that variant as well. You're going to slap in level 1 and 2 Diao Chan and then whatever else you want. And you're not worried about level 3, and you're just going to win a stratagem or Polar Depths because that works just fine.
Yep.
And then the other one is going to say, well, what happens when we go to level 3 too? Like what can that bring to the table? That version, I think, is probably going to be like, we'll touch on the Tera stuff towards the end, but that's going to take some testing because it's going to be a lot more like these Vanitas builds where we weren't sure how putting wind stuff in would affect everything, whether or not it was worth it, and how deep you go into wind. And I think exactly
it's even,
how we feel about Tera.
Yeah, I think it's actually a step beyond that because if you're playing Tera, Diao Chan, I think it's like, and your base element's water, it's really plausible you just don't play Icebound Slam in that situation. Like or even Fractal Rain, you are really not incentivized to mill yourself too much, because you don't really want to mill all of your advanced element cards that you're playing, like otherwise why are you playing Tera Diao Chan, right?
Right.
So that might even just get out of the water self mill kind of archetype in general. But yeah, if you're playing like kind of a lower to the ground 1/2 Diao Chan, maybe even like level 3 for the wither counters on that. I actually see that as kind of living in a space between Arasana and Vanitas. So I like her wither counters are actually like fairly impactful, and outside of her level 3 there are more cards that give wither counters. So for instance, there's a Regalia, a 0-cost water Regalia, cleric accessory, class bonus, banish. It's called Hairpin of Transience. Banish Hairpin of Transience. Put 3 wither counters on target non-champion object. So again, like this isn't really going to like kill anything, because it's pretty easy for your opponent to go to the Recollection step, draw a card, and then their main phase comes. They should have 3 cards to put down to save whatever you put wither counters on. So that's fine, but it does slow them down for a minute, right? And you've got other cards as well. There's a new card called Frostsworn Caress, which is a 5-cost water action cleric spell reaction. So something you can play with her level 1 inherited effect. With Diao Chan bonus, this card costs 3 less to activate. So this is actually a 2-cost for her at fast speed. And its effect is put 4 wither counters on target non-champion object. So again, now you're getting to the point where you can start overloading certain objects with wither counters if you want. Like they were up to 7 wither counters now off those 2 alone. Like you have a play where you can materialize Hairpin, recollect, and go through your turn, do whatever you want, get your glimmer counters if you don't have them, and then on their recollection phase, you can play Frostborn Caress from your memory using Diao Chan. And then now all of a sudden you've got like 1 object with 7 wither counters. You might have 2 objects with 3 and 4, whatever. But that's a lot more memory to put into reserve, or a lot more cards to put into memory. Maybe your opponent has to sacrifice something there. But this is a long way for me to say that Water Cleric now has a good way to answer like Phantasias or non-ally permanents, non-ally objects, which is really, I think, where you're going to see Diao Chan kind of start to shine a little bit more.
Thank you. Yeah, that's exactly where I wanted to go with this ultimately, which is like we set the stage with what kind of each champion is good at. And I think I'm so on the same page about this right between Arasana and Vanitas, in that we play Vanitas for a couple of reasons, but one of them is access to that wind, because that lets us answer. I mean, Taylor, what did we see in testing? The biggest thing that was causing us problems right after Santa Clara, as we said, well, how do we beat this metagame, was they go turn 2, Lantern, frack it. And you're like, okay, that turned off a lot of my engine pretty quick.
Very much so.
But I think cards like Hairpin of Transience and Frostlorn Caress are so cool, because when you combine them like that, your opponent can go, okay, Lantern, frack it, and then you can go, would you like to pay 7? And they may not be able to. They probably will. If they're water, they probably can pay that. And then they'll keep it in play, but you just got a free turn on them, right? Yep. And the thing what we know about this deck is, well, Lantern does cause a problem, it's a hurdle for you. It does not stop you from winning the game.
No. I mean, that's the thing too, right? Like, so you get a free turn on them. But the play we just mentioned with Hairpin and Frostlorn Caress costs exactly 0 reserve from you.
Right, exactly. That's the crazy thing.
You can play your own Icebound Slam. Well, actually, you can't do that because you need to rest Diao Chan to activate her ability. So you can't actually use Icebound Slam.
The slam is going to be the sort of the interesting component of it.
Yeah, 100%. But you can play 2 you can play 2 Practical Polar Depths if you want, and just really pressure your opponent that way to find an answer for those. You can throw down some like refracting missiles if you want to. Like, you have lots of plays. Like, maybe you want to play a couple of Frostborn Paladins. So many options. Just dump your hand and then be like, you either can choose to like answer these, or you can save your stuff, but you're not doing both.
Right. And this deck is, when it drops down a couple Paladins, surprisingly quick to end the game. A lot of people found that out the hard way, realizing that actually this is not just a sit there and do nothing deck, because what it actually wants to do is put down an ally that replaces itself and then make you deal with the problem while it just interacts around everything else that you're doing.
Yep, exactly.
And these cards, I think, are going to be super, super, super good at doing that. And specifically, I think the real power here is just being able to have no other cleric champion has something like Hairpin in the material deck that you can just kind of whip out at any point, even if you don't combine it with Frostlorn Caress. What you get to do is something that we really are always looking for an opportunity to do in the Water Mill game, which is get the opponent to put too many cards down. What sometimes a lot of the game is just trying to find that opportunity, which is why we, in our more recent versions of the deck too, we especially upped our Cerulean Decree count to the point where people were playing 3. I think we've had a few lists with 4 in them too. But just people have been pushing up Cerulean Decrees, because what Cerulean Decree gets to do is just freely tax the opponent too for everything.
Yes.
And so if you hairpin a key card, even if they pay the 3 and you just go, okay, cool, you paid the 3, you made it so if they try to do anything else on that turn and you decree it, now their turn's basically done.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm. And even on top of that, right? Like you can combine this with Blinding Orb. So your turn, you're going to get hairpin. You're going to play it on whatever. You do something on your turn, doesn't matter. You potentially are threatening a Frostbind from your reserve with Diao Chan's effect, or from your memory with Diao Chan's effect. And then on your next turn, after they've tried to play something or not, they're already down 3 cards probably because of hairpin. You get a Blinding Orb for your turn, and now they're down another 2 cards. And if they played anything at all on their turn, they likely have nothing left in hand, or pretty close, right? Which makes you really free to play either a big Icebound Slam or a big Stratagem or anything like that. And just your ticket to win the game is probably like wide open. They probably don't have a way to stop you at that point unless they have a million cards in hand. So
yeah, I think in a similar way that Vanitas is quite good at breaking the water mirrors right now, I think Diao Chan will be able to perform very similarly. If they dare put a Fractal of Rain or a Polar Depths down, you're going to make them pay for it, right?
Yes.
And either you get rid of the thing and good for you, your material deck just killed it was a Fantasia hate, which was awesome.
Yep.
Or you'll open that opportunity at least enough, even if they just pay 3 for hairpin. Sometimes that means, okay, next turn I put out Viridian Protective Trinket and now my Stratagem is basically free.
Yep. Yeah, it's huge. On top of that too, she's got all this extra way to interact with players not playing to the board. She still has really good ally removal options. So the reactions with Floating Memory we teased earlier, is one of them is Dissuading Halt, which is a 2-cost water action cleric spell reaction, fast speed. Target units attacks get -3 power until end of turn, and then it has class bonus Floating Memory. So this is something where you can play some stuff. If your opponent's playing some allies to the board and trying to get aggressive, you can play this with Diao Chan's effect, give it -3, and now all of a sudden you've got a Floating Memory to level up or pay for whatever else you want from your material deck. So just a really, really efficient, very high tempo answer for her. And then like the other huge card she has is Chill to the Bone, which is a 2-cost water action cleric spell reaction.
This is good.
Fast spell. This card is insane. Yep. Target attacking ally gets -2 power and -2 life until end of turn. If you control 2 or more Fantasias, that ally gets -4 power and -4 life until end of turn instead. So basically gonna just eat anything outside of like Majestic Spirit. Insane card. Again, and these are both cards that you can play right off of her level 1. You don't need more than 2 Glimmer counters for these. And they're both keeping you even in the card advantage game. So again, it's not like she's giving up a lot of ally hate for her extra interaction with non-ally decks, non-board, non-attacking decks. She's keeping a lot of that same power. Obviously, this isn't Polaris. Like, this is not going to just like win you the game on the spot when you activate it. But these are cards that are going to allow her to to just continue to gain advantage against ally decks and like slimes and things like that are trying to kill you with allies. It's really powerful stuff still.
Importantly, these come in alongside the other options that we've already been playing with. So
Yes.
alongside Torrential Blast, you now have access to use Chill to the Bone, which can even, the advantage here is Torrential Blast gets shut down by Nullifying Lantern. Chill to the Bone just requires you have 2 Fantasia, and we're going to assume with some of the new Fantasia that you're going to be able to build your deck to be a little more consistent with that if you're playing Diao Chan if you want to, which is probably reasonable. Deck space is getting a little tight here for sure.
Oh, yeah.
But that's going to be one of the challenges to figure out the exact ratios, everything. But yeah, it's a nice additional option now. So your Torrential Blasts don't have to do all the heavy lifting necessarily when the opponent starts getting a little too frisky with a Gildus or something.
Yep. Yeah. So like you just have a ton of different options. Okay. And then just kind of like one other just key card that I think you're going to be seeing a lot of in Diao Chan decks is Acquiescing Rejection, which this might be the most powerful like main deck card in the Recollection deck from what we've seen so far. It's kind of insane.
Acquiescing Rejection is going to be something that I think maybe a few people, because it's kind of an opponent choose thing, are going to undersell it a little bit right away.
Mm-hmm.
I think maybe I'm wrong. Maybe we'll turn out to be wrong here. I think it's really good though.
Yeah. So it's a 4-cost water action, fast speed, cleric spell reaction. Class bonus, this costs 1 less to activate. So you do have to like get some extra glimmer counters on Diao Chan before you can play this. But its effect is negate target card activation you don't control unless its owner has you draw 2 cards. Banish the card that had its activation negated this way. So the initial like kind of comparison is Tether in Flames, right? Which is you corrected me on earlier, Dan, a 3-cost fire spell, reduced down to 1 with class bonus, that counters target card activation unless its opponent has it deal 1+ level damage to its champion.
Yeah, it's like take a fireball or that thing gets negated, except it's not in Rye. So the fireball is
like 3-4 damage at the most. Like who cares? Your opponent's always going to take that 4 damage, and that card is never getting negated, and you're crying every single time. Unless the 4 damage would kill them, and then the card is getting negated, but
you're not winning the game.
You're not winning the game, and you're going to cry.
It's a situation where the opponent chooses whatever you want them to do the least. Whatever they're most okay doing, and when opponent choose effects, we like to call them browbeat effects from MTG because that was one of the card that sort of like popularized the concept at the time. They're historically not great because obviously your goal in a card game is to kind of get the jump on the opponent by playing the thing that they want you to do least at the right scenario and letting them go ahead and just pick their poison and go, oh, this one's maybe not so bad right now, isn't really great. However, that said, the big key difference in browbeat style effects in games is when they are card neutral, then they're pure advantage. The opponent's going to do something that isn't great for them. For example, Cerulean Decree, just talking about it. They go Dungeon Guide and you go Cerulean Decree. The opponent will go, I guess I want it. I'll put down 2. They're not going to let it get negated because they're de-guiding for a reason. You screwed up their turn a little bit, but you didn't kill their turn, right? Mm-hmm. But the key is you also choose draw a card into memory, right? So then you went, okay, cool. I didn't actually lose any influence. I just screwed up my opponent's turn, and then next turn I'm going to try and take advantage of that. Acquiescing Rejection. Did we even read the effect yet?
Yeah, we sure did.
Okay, I'm sorry. Yep. I got so lost in this. But yes, Acquiescing Rejection is in this Dungeon Guide example, and let's say you're playing it out of memory, which is where it's by far strongest, because
it's insane.
Having to put 3 down for it isn't it. I'd do it for sure, but it's not always,
I mean, actually, so I think one of my upcoming favorite plays for this is going to be playing Rejection from hand, having the opponent let me draw 2, and then Frost Binding.
Yeah. That is going to be pretty sick too. Yeah. So the key is whether or not, I guess, you play this out of memory or hand, you're going to play this on their like D guide, and they'll go, well, I need the D guide to resolve. And you go, cool. I just +1. And then, yes. And then you Frostbind, and then you Cerulean Decree, or then you let it resolve, except you might have, if you have like, imagine you go into this turn and you have like 6 cards in hand or something, because you're playing a water deck. That means you even played a Fractal last turn and then just passed. You Glimmer counter the rejection. So now you're at 8 cards. Your opponent's playing Sylvie, right? The good example. So they D-guide to 3. You go from 6 to 8 cards against them. And now you have like double Frozen Dismissal live in your hand, and you still just annihilate their entire turn. Mm-hmm. And at the end of that turn, if you played like double Dismissal, you still have 6 cards in your influence from that, because you got to get 2 of them for free by just saying like, either screw your entire turn up or just let me +1.
Yeah. Honestly, like in that situation, the Sylvie player almost is like, should just let you have the 2 cards or let their card get negated. So their dungeon guide get negated. So you don't draw the 2 cards. And then next turn, just like level to 3 naturally and take your turn that way. Like that might be nicer for you at that point. But
then what you're getting is exactly what we were saying earlier. You just bought a free turn against Slimes. Exactly. And a free turn against Slimes, that's worth a whole lot.
That's worth a ton. Yes. And it's exactly what you want. Like this is, whereas like most of these effects where your opponent chooses is a no-win for the person who plays the card that has you choose, like it's a no-win for the controller of Tether in Flames. This is like a win-win for the controller of Acquiescing Rejection. This card is just absolutely dummy bonkers. I'm very excited to play this card.
Yeah, I think it's crazy playable. I'm really pumped to explore. Now, the big thing is, which negates do you put in your deck at this point? How many of these can you fit in? I don't really know. I don't know the answers to that. I'm not a rocket scientist. I haven't figured the list out yet. Yep. But I do know there's one more water card that I just want to make sure we've talked about. I think we're gonna. There's some new Fantasia that are pretty cool. Mm-hmm. But I might just skip them for now.
The Fantasias are like, I would say they're fine, and they are not worth covering right now.
Cool. Good. We're on the same page. I want to talk about one more thing just because we're on the topic of Slimes.
This is pretty spicy.
Redirect flow is something that if you're out there, if you're one of the slime complainers and you are finally happy that Slime's play rate is going down a little bit, I'm happy to tell you.
It's our time to rise up.
Yeah. I want to say right now, put the nail in the coffin. I'm pretty sure actually by the time we release this, there's an Exia slime that's been revealed. I don't know if that changed everything.
It didn't.
Okay. Slimes is going to need some adaptation to keep going. That's the kindest way to put it, because redirect flow, if water decks continue to be as good as they are, if this is sideboarded against you, I don't think it's going to be easy for you to win the game anymore. This is a 4-cost fast speed action. Guess what? Cleric spell reaction. Surprise. Class bonus. This card costs 2 less to activate. Beautiful. You may choose new targets for target trigger. Okay. So let's be clear. Triggered abilities are those abilities that say whenever, on enter, on attack. On attack's going to be a relevant one soon too, potentially, depending on how they're worded. Actually, I don't remember wording, but on enter is the big one here, and it has to be a trigger that has targets. Okay, and they don't like Dungeon Guide does not target, guys. Okay, yep. You can't.
You are not living the Dungeon Guide dream with this card.
It's not going to happen.
But that's like the worst thing you can do with the card anyway. It's fine.
The best thing you can do is your opponent goes Storm Slime for lethal, and you say, actually, Storm Slime yourself.
It is, what a satisfying play that's going to be.
For free, out of memory.
Yep. What are they doing against that? Nothing. Absolutely nothing.
You're struggling against them. You're like, Frozen Dismissal this, Frozen Dismissal that, Acquiescing Rejection this thing. And they're like, finally, I made it through Storm Slime. And you go, out of memory, just actually kill yourself in the game is what I'm saying. Deal the damage to yourself. But
destroy your Sylvie champion.
Yes, thank you. That's much more PG wording. But this is I mean, very niche, right? But like
it does exactly what you want. Like, this is a card I'm throwing into my Water Merlin sideboard specifically for slimes, because this just straight up wins you the game. They're going to throw down a Storm Slime they're going to make it huge because they're going to use its effect to kill your Incarnate Majesty, your Majestic Spirit. And then they're going to play a second one because now that the Majestic Spirit is gone, you don't have Spell Shroud anymore. They're going to kill you with it. And instead you're going to say, no, that 10, 11, 12, 13 plus damage is all going at Sylvie. And I did a little bit of damage with Ghosts in Majestic Spirit already, so that's enough to get rid of her.
Yeah.
Like, this is something that outside of Diao Chan, outside of these mill decks, is going to see some play for sure. As specific answers, obviously, it's not going to be like, you're not playing this in any sort of general meta, right? This is also probably like a difficult card to play into Fire Merlin, for example. Even though she's throwing big fireballs that can target, like, that's just going to be a little bit more.
Fireball's not a trigger.
Fireball. Oh yeah, this is for target trigger. Yeah.
Only triggers.
So only triggers. Yeah, this is incredibly specific, but
it is so niche.
In the instances where it's insane, it's incredibly insane. And I've said that word a lot this episode already, but I mean, it just completely redirects everything as said in the name of the card. So
Yep. So there's a lot of powerful stuff in this deck. I think a lot of new tools. I agree, not necessarily just cleric. 4 for redirect flow in a non-cleric is going to be quite a bit, but when it's a Storm Slime trigger, you go, okay, like, I'll take that.
Easy.
But I think, I think this is going to be a very fascinating new set of tools that I don't know were entirely necessary for the water mill meta that we're in right now.
Well, let's talk a little bit about Tera and the rest of Diao Chan's kit. Because actually, the more we're talking about this, the more I'm talking about these cards, I don't know if they all actually even work in a traditional water mill deck. I mean, they clearly do. They clearly do. But I think actually they might have a better home in non-stratagem decks, right? Like, these are all really good, but they all also just like help her get to the late game really well. And if her Tera late game is enough to like really just stomp on the opponent somehow, like, that can do a lot. On top of that too, like, there is one more card I want to talk about before we move on, is Shimmering Refraction. And this is a norm card, but it's also a very good norm card. It's a 2-cost fast action cleric spell reaction. Deal X damage to target unit, where X is the amount of Phantasias you control. And then Diao Chan bonus, if Shimmering Refraction was activated from your memory, draw a card into your memory. So if you activate this with her effect, it replaces itself. And this is dealing X damage to any target unit. So it's allies, that's champions. That's kind of it, I guess, for units.
That's right.
but it's a really powerful effect, right? So like, this is something we've seen very similar in Refracting Missile, which is a 3-cost card and not 2. And that is only looking at fractals and not Phantasias. Mm-hmm. Granted, it's X+1 damage and not X, but already we're seeing kind of this become a little bit more powerful in general. And of course, it's norm, so you can play it in not water decks. And I would argue drawing a card in memory is a lot better than floating memory 90% of the time.
The water mill is the situation where it's not better.
Exactly.
And I see where you're going with this, right? Because we talk a lot about water mill because it is the current meta. And I'm 100% sure that you could build a Diao Chan deck. You can get the right mix of these. Because the big thing is a lot of these don't have floating memory. The only one that does is the -3 attack one, which I won a game because I -3'd my opponent with a decree when they went for a Ravishing Finale on me.
No, that card is bonkers. That's like
good. That's good.
I think that replaces like Water Barrier straight up in a lot of these decks, right?
I already cut Water Barrier.
Exactly. Yeah.
People play around it, and I don't even have it in the deck.
Yes. Yep.
But outside of that, you're gonna struggle a little bit to fit everything in, and you're gonna feel like, man, I wish I could play Shimmering Refraction, but it's kind of awkward with the watermill thing. And you're right, Taylor. I think you're going to look at the level 3 stuff and go, there is a viable end game here if I just choose to level to 3 instead. But yeah, then you lose the Icebound Slam, you lose the there's going to be a lot of exploration. There's going to be a lot of messing around. I would not be shocked to see Watermill Diao Chan in Seattle. I would also not be shocked to see Tera Diao Chan in Seattle, right? It's a good kit.
I'd probably be shocked to not see it in Seattle, actually.
Yeah. That's really fair. I think the one thing right before we'll just talk about a couple Tera cards just to kind of hammer in that idea before we close this out.
And before we do that, Dan, why don't you tell our listeners how they can help support the channel?
Oh, sure. I'll do that. And then I'll talk about my one thing I want to mention afterwards too. Yes. If you guys have enjoyed, if you love 55-minute ad reads, 55 minutes into the episode, and you have enjoyed Recollection Step and sort of some of our, we don't actually often do this kind of like deeper strategic discussion this early. So maybe you thought that was kind of cool and you want to throw us a bone here to help us out. You can do so by liking the video. If you're listening on a podcast platform, giving us a 5-star rating there, letting everybody know how much you do enjoy this, leaving a comment on YouTube. That's always super helpful. Love to hear from you guys when you leave your comments. Honestly, just the little fluffy ones that say, great, love another episode from you guys or whatever. That always makes me smile. So feel free to go ahead and drop one of those if you think we deserve it. That's all super appreciated.
Please riz Dan up. He needs it.
Riz me. I keep misplaying every single event I play in, and then I'm inconsolable for a couple hours. So please help me out here. I need a little help. But that's all super good. So thank you all for doing that. And then remember, if you want to support us financially, but you don't want to spend a bunch of extra money or anything, what you can do is just buy your singles when you're going to buy them on TCG Player using our affiliate link. That's bit.ly/shoptcgs, bit.ly/shoptcgs when you're buying singles. And if you're still looking for Abyssal Heaven, this set's going, we're selling a lot. This set's going fast on jwwcards.com. Link in the description of the video as well. We have, well, as of the release of this video, I'm going to guess just based on how the trending of things, we will have already surpassed our Mortal Ambition sales. And the set is a month out still.
Let's go.
The set is going. This is a good set. The Recollection decks are fire. Everything's looking really good. So if you need to purchase it still, head to jwwcards.com and use discount code Maindeck to get 5% off your order as well. We have competitive prices and we'll get you your stuff. So feel free to toss us a bone that way as well.
Yep. Do it soon because I'm thinking about buying out the rest of the stock to troll a local. So
yeah, you better buy it before Taylor buys literally our entire stock out. But thank you guys so much for your support in all those ways. Now, the one thing I wanted to mention just before we got into the home stretch here on the discussion is that, look, this is something that we have players from different stripes listening to this podcast. We try to keep everything kind of open so everybody can get into the content, whether you're a new player or an experienced competitive player. But the one thing you got to know about this Recollection deck from early experience with this is not an easy deck to play. So everything we're talking about here, we're talking about all these, sick plays. You're going to counter your opponent. You're going to stop everything they're doing. I promise you, if you're like a newer player and you sit down with this deck, it's going to take you a little bit to figure those lines out, to get used to things. And the best advice I can have for you whether you're building your own Diao Chan deck or just trying to get better at the Recollection deck one is, as much as I said, it's cool how you can kind of just play everything down and still interact on your opponent's turn. This is water. Okay. You got to play more conservatively than that if you're going to get anywhere. In particular, piece of advice direct from Silidar I can give you here. He used it in the spontaneous live stream that they had earlier in the week. Don't go crazy on the Fantasias. You only need to get to 3 or 4 Fantasias in play to be able to get your one free spell every turn. The only thing more of those does for you is maybe powers up Shimmering Refraction, but what it definitely does for you is puts you way fewer cards in hand. And you need your influence. You need influence to survive in the game. So, don't think you're going to build this deck and be a rock star immediately. It's a tough deck. This is a water control meta, and players are finding out. how skilled some players are versus other ones. I say that from experience. It's a tough game. And it's a tough deck.
Very much so. If you're getting to the point where you're thinking about putting Protective Fractal in your Diao Chan deck, maybe take a step back, take a deep breath, and just think a little bit about
think about your life choices.
Yeah. Well, just not about your life choices. Just think about the deck list and how it's coming together.
Yeah.
Maybe that's one fractal too many.
Yeah. Yep. There's certainly a limit and some decisions that have to be made at some point. Some of the cards in hand don't need to be played down just because they can.
Yep.
And you need to figure out how to keep interacting with your opponent so you don't just get you can watch that live stream and watch Shinja get annihilated by Tristan and Slimes and stuff. I can't remember everyone who played each deck, but yeah, if you just don't keep enough interaction up, you just die. So okay. But let's say you interact properly. Let's say you are a true Cleric Master and you get yourself all the way to Diao Chan level 3. What are you treated to here, Taylor?
You are treated to a lot of tokens. You're going to treat your opponent to a lot of tokens. It's really how this works.
They get the pleasure of all of the tokens in play.
So her level 3, right, puts all these wither counters on things. You've got some other water cards putting wither counter on things. Once you hit level 3, as soon as your opponent's non-token objects are destroyed and you banish them, they get flower bud tokens instead, right? And so just as a quick overview or a quick reminder, destroy happens whenever a card specifically says to destroy an object. It happens when an object's life goes to 0, and it happens if it's sacrificed. There might be one more. I forget if there's one or two more conditions, but those are the main ones. Right? So you get a bunch of flower bud tokens. You give it to your opponent. These are Fantasias. They're chilling. There are a bunch of, I shouldn't say a bunch. We've seen 2 so far, Bloom cards.
I think they're the 2, as far as I understand.
There's Bloom Summer's Glow and Bloom Winter's Chill, which are both Tera cleric spells. And you can sacrifice each of those spells. Has your opponent sacrifice all of their flower buds, and then for each of those flower buds sacrifice that way, your opponent summons some other tokens of your choice. Bloom Summer's Glow lets you summon either Lycoria or Baihua.
Yep.
Baihua tokens for your opponent. Those tokens, Lycoria is going to, at the beginning of your Recollection phase, deal 1 unpreventable damage to your champion. Since your opponent controls that token, it's going to be to their champion. And Baihua is at the beginning of your Recollection phase, each opponent recovers 1. So again, since they control that token, you're the opponent, you're recovering 1 as Diao Chan. You've got Nightshade and Floodbloom tokens from Bloom Winter's Chill. Floodbloom is at the beginning of your Recollection phase. Banish the top 2 cards of your deck. A lot better than Mill here because they're not getting any floating memory off of that. And then Nightshade is at the beginning of your Recollection phase. Put a Wither counter on target non-champion, non-token object you control. So they can't just put Wither counters on all of their new Nightshade tokens. They've got to put it on actual good cards and tax themselves that way. Mm-hmm. So like you can kind of see this end game here where she's controlling the board with her Wither counters, getting your opponent to destroy things, and then like using Lycoria tokens or something, or Floodbloom tokens to kill their opponent over the course of a couple turns. Some kind of death by 1,000 cuts situation here.
I think my favorite situation that I don't know if it'll happen, but I really want it to, is you go with Winter's Chill and you Floodbloom your slime opponent out and you banish a whole bunch of their deck. And then they're like, well, I don't know how to win the game except play a Storm Slime for 20. And then you redirect flow Storm Slime trigger.
That is so sick. I love that so much. But yeah, so like you have this option to just kind of grind your opponent out that way. Both of these Bloom cards also have an element bonus on them. You pay 2 reserve and then discard this card from your hand. You empower 2 and draw a card. So those are both pretty dope. Helps you cycle redundant copies of those, helps you kind of cycle those earlier and find some new things, helps you empower for when that's useful, which is useful on Blossoming Denial, which is a 3-cost Tera fast action cleric spell reaction. And then as long as hold up. This is not it.
I was like, how is this useful?
I thought that was I'm reading the wrong one. Ripples of Atrophy. That's the useful one. This one has class bonus efficiency. So this is another Tera action cleric spell. A slow costs 6 efficiency. So that means it costs level less to activate. So if you empowered 2 from one of the bloom cards, you have 5 level when you activate this, which means it costs 1. And with this, you choose any amount of non-champion objects and put 2 wither counters on each of them. So really starting to tax your opponent if they played to the board at all. Some of the other things you can do here too, like if you played Yudi, that's where Empower comes into play as well. Yudi is a Fantasia from a Tera Fantasia from Mortal Ambition. So kind of you're already looking to play Fantasias as Diao Chan, so you might be playing this. And this is another thing where you put counters on Yudi. I don't have it up in front of me, but you put counters on Yudi, and then for each counter on it, your opponent has to pay that much reserve whenever they declare an attack. And you put a new counter on it whenever you empower more than the amount of counters currently on it. So you can empower 2 to put a counter on it. You can empower 2 again to put the second counter on it from your Bloom Summer's Glow or Bloom Winter's Chill. And now all of a sudden your opponent has to pay 2 every single time they attack. Meanwhile, helping you get more Glimmer counters as you go.
Yep. And all of these things, these things that are putting wither counters still on everything. And remember, anytime your opponent chooses, okay, I don't want to pay this tax because you're taxing me in 100 ways already, I'll just sacrifice it. Then you give them the flower, and then you grow the flower into something later. So really it's just this, it's truly a champion that's just built around taxing and controlling everything the opponent is trying to do. And just eventually turning that into a win. Now, there is one gigantic spell that she has access to, and I think this is, in my opinion, based on sort of an early analysis, this is going to be a critical card because without this, the taxation method is probably a little too slow to get there against a lot of the most aggressive or most powerful decks in the game right now. But we have Season's End, which is a 10 cost, by the way. Remember that for your Kongming shenanigans, Taylor. This is a 10 cost Tera action cleric spell with Diao Chan bonus. This card costs 1 less to activate for each wither counter on objects on the field. So every individual counter out there, which means you can get this to be a pretty affordable rate at some point, but it is slow. So you're going to be relying on your Glimmer counters likely to continue interacting with your opponent on the next turn after you use this. But it says destroy each object with a wither counter on it, which then gives them the flood, the flower bud tokens as well. But yeah, this is how you go. Okay. Board's too crazy. I'm going to reset the board, and then we'll try and gain control after that. If you're really close to death at the time when you're activating this, I don't know that it's going to take a lot of your turn to do, and you really have to try and hold on. And so that's really where a lot of this is going to get kind of tricky. And Diao Chan has to figure out how to make sure she hasn't lost control of the game by the time she's kind of hit that level 3 and is going for the sort of the growing vines that are going to wrap around, and the tendrils that are going to control the opponent and wring the life out of them.
I mean, this works really well on her level 3 turn, right? Like she goes to level 3, she puts wither counters on any amount of objects that your opponent controls, and then just destroys all of them with Season's End, as long as there are enough to reduce it to a payable cost. I mean, that's the thing too, right? The more that your opponent has, the easier it is to play. So if you're playing into a watermill deck and they put some polar depths down early to get that going, they got a Fractal of Rain or 2, they fracturized a power cell. They have 4 or 5 different objects out because they played a Frostborn Paladin too. You're going to put your wither counters on 4 or 5 or 6 of them, and then you're going to play Season's End, blow them all up, get a bunch of flower bud tokens, and have a really good time. And your opponent doesn't even get the choice of whether they're paying for the wither or not.
Right. And Taylor, I have to give you a little bit of credit back here. I'm sorry for this.
I was going to
You
touch on
doubted
this.
yourself, and then
Yep.
I jumped on it, but now I pulled the picture up of Blossoming Denial, and it does not say level 3+, it says level 5+. You do want to empower for this thing.
And this is actually, I think, going to be a key spell in this kind of end game engine as well, just to keep you alive, right? Because you can blow up your opponent's board, but they can still Icebound Slam you for 8. But it's a lot easier to stop that if you have a Blossoming Denial, which, 3 cost Tera, fast action, cleric spell reaction, class bonus. As long as an opponent has 5 or more cards in their memory, this card costs 3 less to activate. So if your opponent does decide to throw an Icebound Slam at you, it's free. You negate up to 1 target card activation unless its controller pays 3. Each opponent summons 2 Flower Bud tokens. You're summoning those tokens regardless of whether the card is negated or not. They can pay the 3. They can not pay the 3. You'll put those 2 Flower Bud tokens on your opponent's field. And then it has level 5+ Recover X, where X is the amount of Fantasias on the field, not just that you control, but on the field.
Yes. Flower Buds are Fantasias.
Yep.
Tristan's Shadows are Fantasias, just a reminder.
Mm-hmm.
That's easy to forget.
Yep.
Taylor, what is my favorite card that has been printed this year? I think you can answer this. It's not too hard.
Fractal Polar Depths.
No, it's more recent than that.
There was a Fantasia in Alchemical Revolution Alter Edition.
Not a Fantasia. No, it was an Alter Edition though. Come on. It's my favorite. It's an SR from
Horticulture.
Horticounter, right?
Horticounter, yes.
Horticounter was my favorite card. Is my favorite card this year. The coolest name ever, and it's a negation that can be free to use and can destroy the opponent's thing and can also progress your win con. It banishes the thing. It does everything. Okay. Blossoming Denial is Horticounter in a lot of ways.
Actually, you know what? As I'm reading this, I think it's a lot better than Horticounter. And
it's possibly better. Yeah.
The reason is because it's free more often. I think the activation, yes. You're not going to have that many herb tokens really to pop off the Horticounter where
I've Horticountered for 7 and stuff before.
For sure. But
they're different in different ways, but
yeah, that's a one-time thing as well. You can play free Blossoming Denials all game. But also because it reduces to 0, you can play it from memory with Diao Chan's ability while not having any glimmer counters.
That's so disgusting.
Yes. So if for whatever reason, you don't have any Fantasias on the field yourself, and they are all under your opponent's control for, you just didn't see a Fractal of Rain, or you're not playing it, or you popped your Spirit Shard token already, whatever, it doesn't matter. This is, oh my God, I completely lost my train of thought.
What you're saying is that this card is robust, right?
This card is robust. You're always able to play it. You're going to be able to play it for hand for free. You're going to be able to play it from your memory for free. It just does not matter what's going on in the game state. It's beautiful. And then the Recover X is really, really nice.
I think massive, actually.
This is, I think, why might be why Tera Diao Chan is playable.
Yeah.
It's always recovering at least 2 because you're going to summon the 2 Flower Bud Fantasias for your opponent. And then if you seasons ended before this, it's going to recover for however many things you destroyed with that. If you've done any other Withering at level 3, it's getting all of that. And also if your opponent has played any Fantasias, it's grabbing those as well. This could just be a huge swing in the game. Even if your opponent pays 3, this might just put them out of reach.
Yeah,
this is, I'm glad we went back to this because this I think is, the more I read this, the more I'm like, wow, this card is dumb.
Yeah, I think so too. I think that Recover X in a lot of game states is going to start at 5. Actually, is going to be kind of the minimum, just assuming you've been kind of doing the Fantasia thing, unless the opponent has been really, really on you about answering them.
Yep.
But we have things like Staff of Blossoming Will, which is, I think, going to be an easy card to play because you can't always guarantee. That's one thing about Diao Chan, and something we haven't really talked about yet. But you can't guarantee the opponent's going to put the things out depending on their game plan to actually wither and then make them lose and then get the Flower Buds with. I think about Merlin decks that are all they really want to do is put one thing out And yeah, they'll pay the 1 to keep the deer out,
Yep.
Or whatever. That's fine. They'll get the attack with the Crux. There's the Ghost of Pendragon. They'll get the attack off, and then they'll sack, and they'll probably give you a Flower Bud or whatever, unless it's lethal. Then they won't. Then they'll just kill you with it.
They might not, because they might want to Crux Sight it back. Actually, that's going to be really hard anyway, because it's just whenever an object is destroyed. Okay, I take it all back.
Yeah.
Well, they just
but anyways, there are decks that aren't committing that many things to board. But the Staff of Blossoming Will allows you to every turn, just like we do with Ingredient Pouch, just go in like Recollection. You just go, oh, cool, put 1 down, make a Flower Bud, make a Flower Bud, make a Flower Bud. When the Flower Buds bloom into other flowers, they stay on board and they're still Fantasia.
Yep.
So there's like no situation when Blossoming Denial is bad. And if the opponents answer all your Fantasia, like you said, Taylor, it still can be played for free off of 0 glimmer counters. So it still is like, it's always good. This thing's always live. And a counter for 3 is a lot, guys. That
is a huge amount. Yes.
Everyone plays around counters for 2.
No one plays around for 3.
3's a lot.
Yep. You're going to get a lot of people the first couple times you play this, probably thinking that you had Frostbind or something up, and then you just get them, or even Cerulean Decree, right? Like maybe they're being sneaky. Maybe they have a 7 influence. They pay 4 to play a card. They're holding 2 in hand. They're like, they can't play their Blossoming Denial for free, and I could pay the 2 for Frostbind. You're still just going to play the Blossoming Denial and deny them somehow. There's going to be situations like that where you just get them.
Think a level deeper here too, right? Is they go for the big play to beat you. They go for the Storm Slime, or just as an easy example, but they go for that, and you go, okay, they put 2 down for it, and you go, okay, Cerulean Decree, and they go, all right, sure, I pay the 2. I guess you'd have to use, if it's a Storm Slime, you use 2, but if it's anything that costs 3, sorry, that's a better example, but they use anything that costs 3 or more, you Cerulean Decree it. Slime, sure, Slime King, right?
Ooh. Yeah.
You go for the decree on it. They put 2 down, and then you go, awesome, activate Blossoming Denial for free now to fully counter it, because you force them to pay the tax first. I mean, there's so many taxation things. They could have even just simply done the Storm Slime after they paid 1 to keep Ethereal out, right? Because you withered an Ethereal, and they went, well, I'm not going to sack that. I'll pay the 1. And now suddenly it just takes any of the other negation abilities, force the opponent to pay 2, and now Blossoming Denial is free and gross, disgusting.
Yeah. This is an insane card. We came out of the developer stream, and I was like, this Diao Chan deck is like, there's a lot of fun cards here, but this doesn't actually feel competitive, especially at Tera, or I should say mostly at Tera. Like Water feels very competitive. Like that's just obviously
Water's good.
Water's just good. But like the Tera is like, is this Kong Ming all over again? The more we talk about these, the more I'm like, there's a lot of stuff here. And then of course, if like just like killing your opponent over the course of a few turns with flower tokens is not enough for you, they also spoiled Lu Bu, which is
you want to talk about Lu Bu now?
I do, because I think it's actually a really good card. Well, like we can just touch on it quick, but I think it's the last thing we need to really talk about here.
You
for
do
the
that,
Tera
and then I
package.
have one final card that's just it's a glimmer of an idea in my head, and I want to talk about it.
Okay, but yeah, I think Lu Bu really like just ties it all together really well, because it's a good defensive option too. But it's a 4-cost Tera ally. It has Taunt and Vigor. It is a 4/4. And on attack, if this is Lu Bu's first attack this turn, you may pay to reserve. If you do, wake up Lu Bu. So it's like attacking. It's a 4/4 that protects you, and it's also attacking for 8 every turn. It's just incredibly powerful.
Yeah.
And then of course there is also the Diao Chan bonus on Lu Bu, which this will happen. You can play 3 locals a week all throughout Abyssal Heaven season. The 4 months of Abyssal Heaven season, you could play 3 locals a week. You can go to each Ascent. So you're at Ascent Seattle. You play Lu Bu in Ascent Worlds. You've gone to Nats. You played Lu Bu there. You've played a couple regionals with Lu Bu. So I mean, we're talking hundreds of rounds at this point, right? Hundreds of rounds of games with Lu Bu. This effect is going to happen maybe one time for you in a sanctioned game of Grand Archive if you're playing that much. But it's very cool. Lubu or Diao Chan bonus. If your champion would die with exactly 32 damage counters on them, banish them, transform Lubu, and destroy all other objects you control instead. And when she transforms into a level 4 Exia champion.
Our first level 4.
She's a warrior human, by the way, on both sides. She has vigor. She has other champions get -3 level, and all allies get -3 power. And she has on ally kill, deal X unpreventable damage to each other champion, where X is the killed ally's power stat plus its life stat. And she's an 8/32. She has 8 power and 32 life. If you guys thought Trisket was a really cool champion replacement, no. She eats Trisket's lunch. She will kill Trisket in 2 swings, and it's going to be insane.
Do you know how hard it is to win when your entire board is eternally -3 power and your champion is -3 level? So like you don't get any level bonuses on anything. And it's just hitting you for 8 every turn. And if you play any cool allies, she can just kill them and then deal the unpreventable damage to you anyway, and then just wakes up at end of turn. So if you try to attack her, she just retaliates for 8 anyway. Also.
Yep. Like, get out of here. Like, she just says, no, you might have won the game, but you probably should have done 1 more or 1 less damage. She's very cool. That's never happening. But a 4/4 taunt vigor that can attack for up to 8 every single turn is it's a lot better than what Crawl was for Kong Ming. It's also a lot easier to activate. Obviously, like there's no preserve cost to go along with the reserve cost. You just pay 4. 4 is less than 5. Like, she's a great card. I think most Diao Chans are going to be trying to find some room for her just as a good board stabilization piece after you seasons end away all your opponent's allies.
Yeah, she can attack 2 allies. And remember, Diao Chan has the bonus of being able to still interact on your opponent's turn, even if she puts stuff down on hers. So
yep.
I agree. I mean, this very well might be something. I have such a hard time with allies that cost 4 or more. But 5 always seems to be the breaking point, and 4 is doable. So
yeah,
I'm definitely interested in seeing if she works. As far as the Diao Chan bonus, your opponent literally just needs to have a Juggle Knives or a Slime Eruption or anything that deals 1 damage.
Mark the target.
Where you go for it. Like the way to actually pull this off, because your opponent's not going to attack you to 32, right? Yep. You have to like do it to yourself they're going to go for lethal, and everyone's like, okay, well, what if I fireball myself or some effect that does X whatever damage to myself in response? And then the opponent goes, oh, in response, I'll deal 1. And then now you're at 33.
Yeah. Like maybe you can catch your opponent like where they've just like gone hands down or whatever for the turn, and like it doesn't look like you're going to be able to get through their next turn. So you find a way to like empower 5 and then leeching bolt yourself or something while you're at 24. Like just the convoluted ways to get the Lubu transformation are bonkers. So
arguably, if they just went hands down against you, you should have just won in a different way.
Yeah, you should probably you should be able to find a way to win at that point, but who knows?
Yeah, it's hilarious. It's really cool. The art's incredible. It's a cool card still on the front side, and the back side is just a juicy eye candy thing that won't realistically happen. And speaking of things that might not realistically happen, but I want to talk about them anyway. So here's what I was thinking, Taylor. We were talking a lot about Diao Chan. We're talking about water. We're talking about all these ways that she can kind of tax the opponent out. And we were talking about how you can still play slow speed stuff and interact with your opponent. And I thought about a card that did see a little bit of play in Utrecht in Noel's. Shout out to Noel from Chess Club. Really creative Water Merlin meta breaking list. Mm-hmm. But man, I'm starting to think that this card could be played in this deck too. It's called Mind Freeze.
Ooh.
You guys know it. You guys love it. Here's what it does. It's 5 cost action, mage spell slow. Has class bonus floating memory, so we don't worry about that because we're not a mage. but it banishes level cards at random from target opponent's memory, and then you return those cards to the memory at the beginning of their next end phase. Now, Taylor, we were talking about some things that empower. We didn't talk about all of them, but there's a number of things that empower in this deck, and we're talking about all these things that kind of force the opponent to put cards down on their turn, whether you're decreeing them, whether you're using free ridiculous Tera negation spells, whether you are just withering them out and making them put them down. And the problem with Mind Freeze is always that your opponent doesn't often put enough down for you to really get it off. And then when you do get it off, then you're hands down basically for the next turn. All these problems are solved, aren't they?
They sure are.
I think this is potentially a playable card in this list.
This is this is kind of sick actually. So yeah, like let's say your opponent doesn't have enough stuff out to be like let you play a Season's End profitably after you've gone to level 3, but you have enough cards still to play or activate a Bloom Summer's Glow effect from your hand in Recollection. So you discard it, power 2, draw a card. You go to your main phase, you still have the Empower 2. Your opponent has 7, 8, whatever influence. You Mind Freeze for 5 at that point. They get rid of 5. Now they've got to, or maybe you just draw your Season's End, right? Now they have to choose whether they're going to actually sacrifice their whole turn, or they're going to try and save their objects or whatever. Yeah, I think Mind Freeze could be very, very good here.
I think just specifically because it's going to pull all that memory out, and then they're left with any wither counters on board from whatever else you've done.
Yep, they
just won't be able to actually keep their stuff. It's almost like a Season's End, except it also deleted their next turn.
Yep. Yeah, this is really bonkers. You're probably playing Mnemonic Charm in these decks. You might even be playing Fractal of Mana, which is a Fantasia from Immortal Ambition that has reservable. It's Cleric Mage and has class bonus rest to Empower 1. So you might be playing a couple different ways to get some extra Empower outside of these Bloom cards. So you might be Mind Freezing for 5, 6, 7, 8 on your level 3 turn. Which is really just going to put them in a tough spot if they went hands down and have any amount of objects on the field. I really like this. Is a really sweet line, actually. I think there's a lot of play here.
Yeah,
I don't think you can get too crazy with it again because it's Mage class bonus on floating, so it's pretty specific. But also at that point too, you don't really care that much about floating if you are at level 3. So
I think Noel ran 2 in that Merlin list, and it was really about just shutting down Slime's turn with a bunch of negation, and then Mind Freezing their next turn, buying you time just to get going again.
Yep.
Which is a really clever, really strong line. Wish I had thought of it. It's awesome. really, really huge fan of that. Yep. But here, you guys heard it first now. Diao Chan, Mind Freeze, go to town, figure the list out. Taylor wants to know because Taylor is looking for every excuse in the world to buy a full set of Diao Chan CSRs. Actually, I think he is just going to do it anyway, but he wants excuses to use them.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I was pretty disappointed when I couldn't get anything figured out for Kongming over this season. So if Diao Chan could be my Tera Queen instead of Kongming, that is totally fine with me.
We've got more spoilers, Taylor, so don't give up hope. I believe Kongming will be coming back too.
I agree. We've seen the Recollection stuff so far, so we've seen the new champions. We haven't seen anything yet to pump up Jin either, right? Jin, we want to.
I was coming.
We got some
Jin
my
fans. Jin CSRs, and I'm just missing the level 3. I'm gonna pick that one up too because I'm ready to just take 40 and be like, whatever.
Yeah, who cares, right?
Good time.
So I'm hoping more good stuff's on the way. We should be finding out later this week if our prayers will be answered. So, but we've got a little longer this episode, so I think we can kind of wrap it up here. We hit all the notes, I think, for Diao Chan.
Yeah, I mean, I think the big takeaway is, did we need more cleric stuff? Probably not. More water stuff? Probably not. Did we get it? We sure did.
We sure did.
And
although there's some good fire stuff on the way. We didn't talk about Gaugia, but that is a very, very strong deck. It appears from what we saw on the stream. So
Y'all, the Guoja cast is coming. Don't worry, Guoja fans. Yep. It's on its way. We're not just Diao Chan stands here.
I was more than prepared to hate Guoja. Like I was ready. Yeah, I was counting on the days until I could really just start trashing her. And this deck, like her cards look really cool, so that might not be happening.
Let's go. We've got Taylor to finally say cards for a tamer look cool. That's a huge step.
That's a pretty big bar. So, but yeah, thanks everyone for listening. We're going to be back to a more regular cadence here moving forward. We've just had a pretty hectic schedule the last couple of months, going over the holidays and getting into this Europe travel and stuff. But we are back to our every 2 weeks, and if we're not, instead of rizzing Dan in the comments, I want you to yell at him,
roast me,
make him know your displeasure and your dissatisfaction and your anger. Also, even if you do that, probably, say thank you, Dan, for the extra editing work put into this episode, because there's probably going to be a bit.
Yeah, that was just
and I'm not going to do it. So
nope, it's all me. It's all me. Hope you guys enjoyed it.
Yep. But yeah, thanks everyone for listening, and we will catch you next time on the Recollection Steps. So have a good one.
See ya.